Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Skills 101. If you've ever opened a GPO and wondered why it exists or who touched it last, you're definitely not alone. Today is all about helping you clean things up, reduce the noise, and get back to a more controlled, manageable environment. Send your questions into the Q&A as you think of them. We'll keep it interactive and wrap up with a live Q&A at the end. Brian, I'll pass it over to you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Gallino. I'm a sales engineer here at Quest Software. And today we're going to be talking about GPOADmin, comparing, consolidating, and cleaning up or attesting to GPOs. There's usually a large amount of GPOs in every organization, and it can get unruly at some times. And really what we need to do to be able to modernize our journey going forward with our Active Directory environment, as well as our Intune environment, is to be able to really clean up the bloat that we have in the environment, make sure that we're not overlapping GPOs, and be able to understand where we're doing the same thing in different places. And so GPOADmin makes it very easy for us to do comparisons and consolidation in the environment, being able to get reports between similar GPOs that have different versions so that we can see what's in our live environment today, as well as the versions that we've had behind that, as well as being able to compare across multiple GPOs and see where there's differences between those GPOs and similarities. Once we find those differences and similarities, can we merge the GPOs together and consolidate them down from, 2 GPOs to 1, which we can do today with GPOADmin, or in the future, coming out as a new feature, being able to take multiple GPOs and merge them into one consistent GPO. And that way we can clean up our environment, not have so much overhead, understanding where certain GPOs are linked to which OUs, and really be able to understand the environment better and have a cleaner look at the environment and understanding what settings are being pushed to which devices. Another problem that we see in organizations is ownership of GPOs. Maybe there's multiple groups within your organization that have management over those specific GPOs, and we need to know if those GPOs are still being used in the environment, and if they're not, can we clean them up? And so we have the ability with GPOADmin to put a managed by person on each of the single GPOs or a folder full of GPOs so that we know who the exact owner is of that GPO. And then we can put attestation emails around that, and we can bring those out to, from 1 week to multiple years, right? And we can have that owner get those emails and give them options for attesting. They can either attest via an email that you see here in our slide, or they can come into the console and attest right from the GPOs themselves, or a deployment action. They make a change, they deploy it into the environment. When that deployment happens, that is considered an attestation, and they can move on and the attestation clock resets. So it allows us to understand, hey, are GPOs sitting stagnant? Are they being used? And if they aren't being used and they aren't attested to, hey, let's work through a process, which will go through workflows like we showed in the last Skills 101 course, to be able to go through that deletion process and make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening and if that GPO is getting cleaned up and deleted. All right, so we're here in the live GPOADmin console, and you can see here that I am an administrator in this console, because we can see our live environment as well as the version control root and every folder that exists in this version control root. I'm now in my bgalano folder and this servers folder here. And we can see that I have multiple GPOs that I can look at here. And when I look at a specific GPO, I can right-click on this GPO, and you'll notice that we have an options for reports here. Now, this just shows a small list of reports that we can do with this single GPO, and there's obviously a larger list of reports that we're going to talk about in a different Skills 101 course. But what I can see here from this GPO is I can look at the latest, which is the latest version of the GPO that I have in GPOADmin today, whether that be the one that's deployed, or maybe there were a few check-in and checkouts done, and I can see the differences between those, right? I can look at the live version of the GPO, so that's going to pull the version of the GPO that's actually last been deployed, and I'm going to be able to look at that and see the settings that are in that live GPO. One of the other things that we can do is difference reporting, right? And if I click on difference reporting, we're going to see that I have the option to choose a live copy as my base version, or any of the other versions that I have in this GPO as my base version. And that's what we're going to delineate our differences from. So if I'm looking at my live base version GPO, and I want to look at something that was deployed earlier, or a version of a check-in and check-out that was done earlier, I can choose one of these versions. I can also choose multiple versions if I want to do a variation and look at the differences between two different versions within the GPO against that live version. Now, what do I want to see in that versioning? I can look at all settings so that it's going to show me anything that hasn't changed as well as the differences. I can look at similarities only, and I can look at differences only. I'm going to show all settings here because that's going to make it easier for us to kind of see the entire report all together. And then you'll understand how we would see our differences and similarities if you were to choose those as the onlys. We'll hit OK here and we'll run a report. And you'll notice up the top here while the report's running that I have two different tabs that I can look at. One is going to be the base version against my 23.3 version that I chose. And one is going to be the base version against the 22.2 version that I chose. It's going to take a few moments for this report to run, and then it's going to come up as we can see here. And I'll expand this out. And one of the things that you'll notice right up front is that we're not just doing a settings report like you would see with our live and latest report, right? To look through those different settings and see exactly what's happening in that latest version or that live version that's out actually being used in the GPMC. This is a little different. It's going to show us a nice report with some color coding in it, and you'll see up here that we have a summary in the top right corner that's going to show our added items in green, our removed items in red, and our changed items in blue. As we go through the report, you can see here that we're going to show some of the unchanged things because we chose all settings, right? but we're also going to see our adds, our removes, and our changes. Now we're basing this off of our base live version, right? So we can see that certain things were added in version 23.3 that aren't in our live version, right? So we can see that authenticated users is here under the security filtering and other unnamed SID. We can also see that there's a change between permissions on the delegation. In the live version, we have a read, and in the version 23.3, we have an apply group policy. And then we can also see our removals. In the live version, we have a user account here, as well as an allow, a custom, and an inherit of no. Whereas in the 23.3 version, we don't have anything, and so that's why it's showing it as a remove. If we were to jump over to the second tab, we can see here that we have similar things, right? Same read and change, same remove, same adds. So these two versions were very similar in their changes. And you can see as we scroll through, we can easily look at the color-coded changes to see what the differences are between these two GPOs. What this does for us is it makes it a lot easier for us to understand what's actually happening in the environment and what's hasn't changed, right, between the GPOs, or what's similar between the GPOs. One of the other things that we can do here is if I was to choose 2 or 3 different GPOs, right, and we'll take these 2 here. If I drop down and go to reports, we'll also get a GPO comparison report. And what this report's going to do is it's going to show us that similar older settings report that we would get just straight out of our GPMC, but it's going to mark everything that's different between the two GPOs, and those GPOs are going to show up in the same report. It's going to take us just a quick second here to bring this report up, but it's going to mark off each of the differences so that we can see where we have similarities and where we have differences. If I click on the show all, you'll notice here as I drop down, where there are similarities, we have no markings. So we can see that TitanCorp.local and TitanCorp.local are the two in the same. But as we come down and look at create and modify, we can see that the dates are different between the two versions of the GPO. As we go through this, we have the ability to easily look and see where the differences are between these two GPOs so that we can decide exactly what we want to change and what we don't want to change, or what might need to change in a merge or a consolidation. Once we have all this information down and we understand that, maybe these delegations are okay to be different, right? And we can merge the two together. We can come in here and decide to grab these two GPOs, and we have the option to merge. Okay. And when we try to merge two GPOs, we get a couple of options. We can merge into a new GPO so that the group policy is brand new and it leaves the other two GPOs alone, or we can decide to merge into one of the two existing GPOs that we're merging together. In this scenario, I'm going to choose new. And during this process, when we merge the two, it's going to bring up anything that's a conflict in the GPO. And we can see here that we have two conflicts that are showing up, right? One is our new guest name setting, And in one GPO, we have John Smith, and in the other GPO, we have contractors. And maybe I want to make sure that the new GPO has contractors in it as the new guest name. The second one is auditing. And based on the way that Microsoft sees auditing, we're going to get a 1 or a 2 or a 3 here. A 1, it means that the auditing is enabled, but failure and success are turned off. A 2 would mean that one of the fails or successes is turned on. And a 3 means that this is enabled and both failure and success are turned on. And maybe I want to make sure that this new GPO has both of those turned on as well as the Audit DS access enabled. So I'm going to choose 3. I'll hit OK here. And now we've resolved those conflicts and we have the option to name our new group policy. And so I'm going to make this BG-new-consolidated. And I'll have the option to choose the forest or domain that I want to put this in, right? And we're going to choose Titan Corp. And we can do that based on trust, right? So if you have two-way transitive trust between forests or domains, we have the ability to pull those domains and forests into one single console. If you have untrusted forests and domains, we can put a GPOADmin server in each of those forests so that you can tie everything together in one single pane if you have networking between them. But they'll have separate version control routes. We'll hit next. We'll have the ability to choose our security filtering here and add anything that we want. We can even go into the advanced tab here and change any rights or settings underneath the GPO itself, right? We'll hit next. We'll have options to add a WMI filter if we want. I'll choose none here just for ease of use. And we'll say OK. And now we have our BG new consolidated with our conflicts resolved and all the settings back together so that this merged GPO, the server GPO1 and server GPO2 together, and we now have this one consolidated GPO. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, right now we can do this with 2 GPOs, merging them into one, and then you could continually merge, and get cleaner and cleaner in your environment. But coming up, I believe in July or at the end of the year, we'll be adding multiple GPOs to this. So you'll be able to choose more than 2 GPOs and merge those and do conflict resolution between multiple GPOs so that you can clean up the environment and get those GPOs down to exactly what you need, as opposed to having multiple GPOs overlaying with the same settings across the entire Active Directory structure, which can cause confusion, it can cause outages, and you really want to be cleaned up so that administration is just easy and there's not as much overhead there, right? So that deals with our consolidation. Now we have everything cleaned up in the environment. We know that we only have GPOs that are needed in the environment. We've reduced the number of GPOs needed in the environment. And now we want to make sure that those GPOs that exist after our consolidation have someone that's the owner of them, and they can attest to them being used so that we're constantly making sure that cleanup is done through the environment if a GPO isn't being used anymore. And that can happen, right? Because most organizations are living in a hybrid environment. And sometimes some of those GPOs are going to get pushed to Intune so that there's really no need for a GPO to be used anymore because there's an Intune policy in place. Or maybe there was something that was being done in the environment that doesn't need to be done anymore, and that GPO just goes out of use. And so we want to make sure that we can have those owners of the GPOs attest to those GPOs and make sure that they're being used on a regular basis. And you'll notice here in this column managed by that I have multiple GPOs that can be managed, and I can decide who's managing those. So I can decide to right click on this servers folder here and choose the manage by person, which would fill in every single one like we see here, right, with my bGalano account. I can also go specifically to a GPO and decide, hey, I want to change this manage by to someone else. And I could take my user Ted Williams here. And I'll say okay to that. And we can now see that Ted is the managed by person for the server GPO2. So we can get real granular as to who's the owner. And then once we have that done, I can jump into one of these GPOs, look at the properties, and we'll see all the different tabs here. And we'll take a minute just to get my mouse to pull this over. But you'll notice that we have an attestation tab here. And one of the things that's great about GPOADmin is this is like a Windows file server, right? We can give rights at the top and have it flow all the way through inherited rights. We can break inheritance anywhere in the process also. So I could choose to have attestation on this one GPO if I want, or and different attestation at the folder level across the rest of the GPOs. Once I do that, I have the option to enable attestation, and I can choose, many different weeks. I can choose months. I can choose years. I can then add a subject line for this email. And we do have switches that we can put in here so that it fills in the type and the name of the GPO and the version and the status of the GPO and who the trustee name is. And we can add those things in the last deployed on dates. And this email will get sent out to that managed by person when it ends attestation. And you'll notice here, if I click on this general tab, that we can see that I last attested on April 3rd when I created this GPO. And my next attestation is going to be tomorrow on the 10th. And so what we can do there is we can do multiple things as the managed by person of the GPO. I can decide to go to an email, and I have just one sample here because I don't have my attestation email from that one GPO yet. But we can see here that we got an attestation email from my coworker, Anna, for a GPO that I have in one of her folders. And I can choose to attest right through the email here, letting Anna know that I'm still using that GPO and I'm going to continue to use it. That's one way that I can get that date to change and move forward and the clock to reset. I can also jump back into the console here, and I can choose to attest right from the console to let her know that the date's changed and the clock's reset, and that yes, I am still using this GPO. Another way that I can do this is I can deploy this GPO. So if I need to, if I have a minor version here and we've checked in and checked out a couple of times, as you can see, our minor version is at .2. I can decide, hey, you know what? I really do need this GPO. Let me see what my changes are. Yes, I want to deploy this going forward. We'll deploy it immediately. And we'll send this GPO out to the live environment. And by deploying this GPO, that's going to reset my clock as well. So that if we go back into the properties, we can see that I have attested today, and now my attestation expiring date is April 16th of 2026 moving forward. So it allows us to understand, is a GPO being used? Is it sitting stagnant and can be deleted? And once we get that news that a GPO can be deleted, now I can go through my workflow process of going in and deleting that GPO, right? And I'll have a process around who's approving that deletion, right? And eyes will be on that deletion so that we know where it went. There'll be comments showing you where that deletion happened. We can choose to keep the backup that we have in the GPOADmin storage folder, so that if things need to be restored, we can pull that GPO back in, and everything will work perfectly. And that's our attestation piece. So what did we learn today? We learned that GPO comparison and consolidation in the native GPMC is pretty much nearly impossible. We have to open up settings reports and compare across them by ourselves without any markings to see exactly what's similar and what's different. And if there's a lot of settings in that GPO, it's really hard to look at it and understand or not miss anything in that report. With GPOADmin, we can look at our latest and live version settings so that we can see what differences and similarities there are in those GPOs, making comparison much more easy. We can look at comparisons to see if there's differences between the GPO that we have or a later version or an earlier version of it. And also look at between two GPOs to see what the differences are there and get that all color coded so that we can easily look and see what those differences are. We can take two GPOs today and merge them together into a newer existing GPO. And we're going to get conflict resolution there so that those settings can be chosen before we create that new GPO or push any changes into an existing GPO. And further down the road, we're going to get even more merge capabilities so that we can do multiple GPOs. We can add owners to folders or single GPOs so that we can do attestation. And we can send those attestation emails out, letting those owners know, hey, are you needing this GPO? Can we clean it up? Can we delete it out of the system so that we can keep our GPO environment clean and clear? And they have the option to attest to those GPOs via email, in the console, or by a deployment action, as we showed in the last screen there in the demo. So as we move on, I'd like to let you know about our next Skills 101 session. We're going to lock down our GPOs and with security delegation and protection. We'll talk about least privilege, how we can really delegate out to our users within the system and allow one single service account or GMSA to be able to make those changes on the back end of the system. And that's going to happen on September 30th at 11 a.m. And I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day.